When I first moved into this quiet, well-kept neighborhood, I never imagined the homeowners association supposed to keep things peaceful would one day tear my family apart. It all started on a sunny afternoon when my kids decided to set up a small lemonade stand right outside our driveway. They were excited, laughing, just being kids. But apparently, selling lemonade broke some obscure HOA rule about unapproved commercial activity. At first, I thought I'd get a warning or maybe find something annoying but manageable. Instead, what happened next flipped my whole world upside down. That evening, 2 uniformed HOA security officers showed up at my door. They handed me a letter claiming my kids had been temporarily removed for their own safety while an investigation took place. I felt like I was living in a nightmare, my own kids, kidnapped by people who were supposed to protect the neighborhood. I begged. I called everyone I could think of, but the HOA board wouldn't budge. They hid behind rules and legal loopholes, acting like they were above the law. My neighbors were either too scared or too loyal to the board to help me. Days turned into weeks. Every night, my house felt emptier and my anger grew stronger. But I wasn't about to just sit there and let this happen. I dug into every bylaw, every shady deal, every misuse of power this board had pulled for years. What I found was bigger than I ever expected: fraud, bribery, threats. Piece by piece, I built my case. I knew I was risking everything, but I didn't care. They took my kids, and when the time was right, I walked into that courtroom ready to expose them all. What happened next shocked the entire neighborhood, Dan. Trust me, this was just the beginning. Standing there in that cold courtroom, I could feel everyone's eyes on my neighbors whispering, the HOA board members pretending to look calm, but I could see the fear behind their fake smiles. They never thought someone like me would fight back. They always counted on people staying quiet, paying fines, and minding their own business. But they messed with the wrong parent. Before all this, I didn't even know much about how HOAs really worked. I just paid my fees and trusted they'd keep the lawns neat and the streets clean. But once they took my kids, I found out fast that these people were like their own little government. They had rules for everything: what color your mailbox could be, how tall your grass could grow, and apparently, how your kids could play outside. I started talking to other families who'd had run-ins with the board. Some got fined thousands of dollars for tiny things like leaving a trash can out too long. Others got threats about losing their homes over unpaid dues. But nobody ever pushed back because the board always had fancy lawyers and deep pockets. They hid behind big words and complicated documents. Late at night, I'd sit at my kitchen table with stacks of papers, meeting notes, bank statements, emails neighbors secretly gave me. I found missing money, secret deals with shady contractors, and even proof that a few board members were blackmailing residents who tried to complain. I was angry, but I was careful. One wrong move, and they'd bury me in legal trouble. Every day without my kids felt like forever, but it also made me stronger. I knew if I was going to beat them, I'd need undeniable proof and the guts to stand up when no one else would. And deep down, I wondered how far would they go to keep their secrets hidden. One night, as I was digging through old HOA newsletters, I found a tiny note about a secret meeting that had taken place years ago. It was buried in the fine print, but it hinted at something bigger, something about emergency powers. The board gave themselves during a vote nobody seemed to remember. I started wondering if that's how they justified taking my kids. It made no sense. But with this HOA, nothing did anymore. Meanwhile, my neighbor, Mrs. Carter, an older lady who'd lived here since the neighborhood was built, knocked on my door. She looked over her shoulder before slipping me a box of old documents. She whispered that her husband, who'd been on the board once, always said they were hiding skeletons no one wanted to find. Inside that box were copies of checks, signed agreements, and letters that proved the board had been paying off certain residents to vote their way in meetings. The more I uncovered, the more dangerous things felt. I noticed a black SUV parked near my house more than once, engine running, windows tinted. My phone would ring at odd hours, no one on the other end. I started to wonder if they were trying to scare me into backing down. But if they thought fear would stop me, they clearly didn't know how far a parent will go for their kids. At the same time, I found out one of the board members, Mr. Reeves, had a personal grudge against me. Years ago, I'd called him out at a neighborhood BBQ for yelling at some kids for skateboarding on the sidewalk. Now, he was the loudest voice saying I was unfit to raise my children. It made my blood boil. I knew if I didn't act fast, they'd bury the truth. But every answer I found only raised more questions, like who else was helping them, and what were they really hiding behind those fancy HOA rules. I barely slept in those days. Every night, I'd sit by the window, half expecting someone to break in and snatch the box of evidence I kept hidden under the floorboards. I installed cameras around the house and kept my phone recording during every conversation. I wasn't taking any chances they'd already stolen my kids. I wasn't going to let them erase the proof. One evening, just as I was about to leave for a meeting with my lawyer, I got a call from a blocked number. A deep voice warned me to drop this nonsense or regret it forever. I hung up, heart pounding, but it only made me more sure that I was close to something huge. They were scared damned that gave me just enough courage to push harder. I decided to hit them where it hurt most, their money. I leaked some documents to local news outlets about the HOA's shady deals with contractors and the fake maintenance fees they'd been charging. Neighbors who'd once ignored me now started showing up at my door, furious that they'd been paying thousands for repairs that never even happened. Late one night, Mrs. Carter called me, whispering so low I could barely hear her. She said she overheard Reeves and two other board members planning to destroy old files that weekend. Files that could prove they'd lied about their authority to take my kids in the first place. That was it. I had to get those files before they disappeared forever. I didn't know who I could trust, so I told no one where I was going. I waited until the neighborhood was asleep, grabbed a flashlight, and headed for the old HOA storage shed behind the community clubhouse. Every step I took felt like someone was watching me. My hands were shaking, but my mind was set. If I was right, what I'd find in that shed would finally tear their little kingdom apart unless they found me first. I crept behind the clubhouse, every crunch of gravel under my shoes sounding like an alarm in the night. The storage shed looked harmless, just an old wooden structure with a rusted lock. I'd come this far. There was no turning back. I forced the lock open with a crowbar I'd hidden under my jacket, my heart racing so loud I could barely hear the crickets. Inside, it smelled like old paper and mildew. I flicked on my flashlight and scanned rows of dusty boxes, each marked with boring labels, meeting minutes, maintenance reports, resident complaints. I tore through them, tossing aside old junk until I found one labeled emergency. Records? I pulled it open, hands trembling. That's when I heard a soft creak of the shed door behind me. I froze. I wasn't alone. I killed the flashlight and ducked behind a stack of boxes, barely breathing. Through a crack, I saw two figures slip inside. They were whispering, shining their own flashlights. One voice was Reeves. He was with another board member, a heavy-set man named Grant, who always pretended to be too clueless to cause trouble. They were talking about burning the files tonight, making it look like an accident. If they found me, they'd do more than just scare me off. I could feel it. As they moved closer, I spotted something that made my blood run cold. Another folder tucked under the emergency records. It was marked custody orders. I realized then this wasn't just about shady deals or hidden money. They had fake legal papers that made it look like I'd signed away my kids willingly. In that moment, it hit me how deep this went. This HOA wasn't just abusing power, they were forging documents, ruining lives to keep their grip on the neighborhood. I clutched that folder tight, praying they wouldn't hear my pounding heart. One wrong move, and this whole plan could blow up before I ever saw my kids again. I held my breath as Reeves and Grant argued about whether to burn everything now or wait until morning. They were so close I could hear Reeves' keys jangling as he shifted his weight. My mind restive, they found me crouched behind those boxes with that custody orders folder in my hand. I'd never see daylight again, let alone my kids. Then, by some miracle, Reeves' phone buzzed. He cursed under his breath. Someone from the board was calling, panicking about the news leak. While they argued, I knew this was my only shot. I slowly slipped toward the back wall, folder tucked inside my jacket. My hand found a loose panel just big enough to squeeze through. I didn't dare look back, pushed through the rotting wood and hit the ground outside. Heart hammering so loud I thought it would give me away. I ran through the trees behind. The clubhouse, branches slapping my face, gravel digging into my palms as I crawled under the fence. I didn't stop until I reached my car, breathless and shaking.